now that we're all together here, what is there to talk about?
Jackson Center.
Absolutely.
What else?
That was good job, Stan. You took the words that I wasn't going for.
Right.
Well, what's new at the Robert H. Jackson Center?
Well, I think a lot of great programming. Education, for one thing. We've had real good attendance by school children learning about the Holocaust and about Jackson's role. And we have actually got New York State, I'm not sure about Pennsylvania yet. Peggy Morgan's working on it, but to put a curriculum, a requirement, in I think it's 8th grade social studies about Robert H. Jackson and the Holocaust.
Bill, anything you want to say concerning Robert H. Jackson and the Jackson Center? We do have a couple of other things we could move on to.
Well, very quickly, I'm here really because Robert Jackson was basically born in Pennsylvania, in Warren County, and so we have a very close and very real relationship with the Chief Justice, with the Justice, and I'm delighted to be able to participate in a very worthwhile effort to ensure that the foundation, or the center, continues to operate and continues to provide the sort of educational and outreach programs that they have provided so well over the years. And I think it also ties in very closely to the relationship with Chautauqua Institution, which is also a very close one, and I'm very pleased to support that in any way I can.
Very good relationship between them. If I could have one commercial announcement, Sunday night at the Chautauqua Suites, Mark Russell is doing, I think, his own program this summer on behalf of the Jackson Center. It's a fundraiser for us, 6 o'clock Sunday night. And with the material he has this year, I gotta believe it's gonna be hilarious.
Outstanding program, that's right.
As you may well be aware, he said on Guster Plaza the other day, and I was not ear witness to this, but Howard Sanders, a regular guest here at our platform, and his wife were, that he was running for the president of Chautauqua. He had plans to build a wall at Remus Point, and he would make sure that they paid for it.
Right.
Well, as a new resident of Bemis Point, I don't know what I think.
18th of August, Bill, we've seen it since the convention. Stan, I haven't seen you since the Democratic and Republican conventions, but I want to open this discussion to get your perspective on what has happened to this presidential race since the Democratic and Republican conventions in July.
Want to go first? I am absolutely delighted. The contrast in the conventions where the Republicans really were a one-man show. I've never known a presidential candidate to show up every night, really, in person. And the Democratic convention where most of the former presidents and other dignitaries participated, and I thought it was very well done. And I believe that Hillary Clinton has used the impetus from that convention to springboard towards a fairly successful early campaign. Now, it is very early in this process, and I remember in 1992 when Bill Clinton was running third about this time of the year in the polls. So, I don't take it for granted that it's over or about to be over, but I think things are going very well for the Democrats following our convention.
I do take it for granted that it's over, frankly. Republicans have imploded, like the only word for it. The party has kind of imploded because of, I think Hillary's best asset in this campaign is Donald Trump. I mean, it couldn't be a better, worst enemy, than she, a friend that she could have, because he has done, since the convention, which I thought ran pretty well. It was a one-man show, as Stan points out, but it went fairly well. They tried to humanize Mr. Trump and show that he was a decent father and so forth and so on. And so I think they came out of the convention quite well. But the whole idea that he was going to pivot somehow from the primary season to become a more sensible, more reasonable general election campaign has not taken place. In fact, it's gone exactly the opposite direction. So that right now, I think today's announcement that the campaign organization has been yet again reshuffled, and now you have people who are clearly not even Republicans. I mean, the guy that's now going to be running the campaign, I guess, is Mr. Bannon, who has no real interest or any loyalty to the Republican Party at all. They're going to run a very outsider, sort of revolutionary campaign, and a lot of luck, because I think they're going to go down to enormous defeat.
Well, let me approach that question from another perspective of both Bill and Stan. Poll numbers are down, and the Stan suggested it's 80-some days to the election, so you can't put too much money on poll numbers right now. But if Donald Trump is on a slide and the trends seem to be working against him, is he the sort of candidate, the sort of person who could sense, I have nothing to lose, so I'm just going to keep shooting from the hip and perhaps regenerate some interest in his campaign, in his sort of off-the-beat style? Is there a possibility that if he would just went to be Donald Trump again and started firing off as he did during the primary season, he could regain some momentum? I don't hear a lot of enthusiastic response to this.
No, Bill probably should answer it, but I don't think so. I don't think that his shooting from the hip is going to be appealing to the moderate, frankly, suburban Republicans and independents. I just don't see it. I can't imagine now him appealing to that group in Pennsylvania, for example, or North Carolina, which I know a little bit about, that are swing voters. That's what you really have to aim at now. It's not just energizing your base, although that's somewhat important in terms of turnout. But the independent voters, I don't think, are going to be motivated by shooting from the hip.
The mathematics are totally in Hillary's favor. I mean, after all, Donald Trump really never won a majority, even of the Republican Party, until the very end of the primary season. He was running between 28 to 35% of the Republican base. No Democrats involved. It was a Republican base. So the fact that he goes into the general campaign with a base of maybe 35 to 38 of the country, because they're Republican, the outreach is going to be critical, and as Stan indicates, that outreach ain't going to be there, I think, with independents or the middle, the independent moderate Republicans, or certainly to attract any Democratic votes. It's not going to be there. So I think it's they're going to run a renegade campaign, and it's going to be an ugly campaign. It's going to get uglier by the day, and it's just a terrible tragedy for I think for the country, particularly for the Republican Party, which is going to have great difficulty resurrecting itself in any kind of a recognizable fashion after this campaign.
Although, Bill, remember 1964? You're old enough to remember.
I do remember that very well.
And we thought that the Republican Party was dead, having suffered the worst loss since Roosevelt. And 4 years later, you won the presidency. So the resiliency of American political parties is significant too. I personally think. Now, I've never been asked to give advice to the Republican Party, but I personally think if they get drubbed this fall, it'll be better for the party, because then the more common sense oriented may be in the ascendancy. And I hope, actually, as a dedicated Democrat, I hope for a strong Republican Party. Absolutely. Because the essence of democracy is competition. And that's what's wrong with congressional races and gerrymandering now, is that you don't get enough competition. And that's not only true of free enterprise, it's true of our democracy.
Political process. The other thing I would point out that I'm really watching very closely is there's going to come a point during the next 80 whatever days are left that the leadership of the establishment Republican Party is going to say, look, too many of our congressional candidates and too many of our senatorial candidates are threatened with defeat in this thing, and it's very possible that there may be a withdrawal of funding and support by the party itself, and let the Trump campaign do their own thing. Now, that may not happen. I'd almost hope that it would happen, but that's a real risk, I think, because the party can't just go blindly down the road to see their majority in the Senate lost, and even perhaps the majority in the House lost.
If I take this a little too far, if I'm a little too hyperbolic, stop me. But what I heard you say, Stan Lundine, and maybe Bill Klinger, you agreed with this just a little bit, is that concerning the Republican Party, Donald Trump is a purgative. No one likes to take them, no one likes the results, but occasionally they are absolutely necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's very possible. I mean, obviously that was the case. I mean, I think there's a pox on both your houses, really. I mean, the fact that both of the candidates running for president this year are universally disliked by a majority of the American people. I mean, that's a really sad commentary that neither candidate really attracts the sort of enthusiastic support that candidates should have. So there's been a sense that the system doesn't work, a pox on both your houses, and let's throw everybody out and put new people in and see what happens.
Now, I'm going to pick up one more question, then I'm going to ask Greg Peterson, who's filming this, to change places with me and have him address you, bring up a couple of issues if you would like to. But in the midst of all of the uproar that seems to follow Donald Trump, are we missing something that we ought to pay closer attention to in terms of the shadow of malfeasance or mistake or error or illegality that occasionally surrounds Hillary Clinton? Should we focus on that more?
I'm very defensive of Hillary, not only because she's been to Chautauqua several times and loves this place, but Louis Black, the comedian, was in Jamestown, and he says, you know what it is with Hillary Clinton? She's been around too long. They've been throwing dirt at her for 20 years, and it's sticking. Sure, she made a mistake having the personal emails. There's no question about that. She's acknowledged that she made a mistake, but I personally think she's an ethical person, and that I understand the poll. I understand that a lot of people have negative views towards her. I think it's unfortunate and sad that they do.
It is. The fact is that Trump has allowed that issue to not come to the fore, because basically he's made himself the issue, and as long as the campaign is focused on Donald Trump, for better or worse, it takes the heat off of any attacks that are being made against Hillary. So I think that they missed an opportunity. They wanted to make hay with the Benghazi or anything else. They lost that opportunity because Mr. Trump took over the whole media stage.
Bill, in an earlier stage of your life, you used to have the inability to walk through an airport like in Pittsburgh without people recognizing you for your role in Congress and your role dealing with the subcommittee dealing with Whitewater. How does this all play into what's going on today?
I mean, in terms of
your chairmanship?
I think Congress has never been the most popular body in the world. I mean, who was it? Mark Twain said there's been no such thing as an indigenous criminal class except for Congress in the United States. So we've never been a very popular body, and I don't think that that changes because people, and one of the reasons for that is something Stan and I talked about earlier this summer, and that is the corrupting influence, or at least the appearance of corruption that exists when you have sloshing money floating around in these campaigns, so that everybody is sort of suspect that you're somehow on the take because you're receiving funds to campaign and support your campaign and so on. So that's we could certainly solve that if we could solve the big money problem in Congress. But I think the Congress is, at this point, it's the lowest ebb that I can remember in terms of public approval. About, 13%, I think, is the highest we've been in the last 5 years. So it's a very serious situation, not just because Congress is in bad order, but everybody. The Supreme Court no longer has the total confidence and faith of the American people, and certainly the Obama administration has its detractors, so that there's really a lack of trust or confidence by the American people in all three branches of government.
A few years ago, Congressman Houghton, together with somebody on the Democratic side, put together an event, maybe 2 years worth, in Hershey, a sense of inviting the congressman for sort of an opportunity to get off campus and have a civility conference. That's my term.
That was there.
Yeah, you get a sense that that even had much of an impact, Stan?
No, unfortunately, Amo Houghton was one of the great people that I've known in my public life, and I think he was entirely correct that restoring a sense of civility, in fact, restoring bipartisanship to the Congress would have been a very good thing, but it went down in flames. I don't think it made any progress at all.
One of the reasons, of course, is that over time, I think when Stan and I were in Congress, we basically moved our families to Washington. We knew members on both sides of the aisle, co-sponsored legislation across the aisle. And it was a much more convivial, it was also congenial group of people, and that has all changed. Now members don't bring their families to Washington, they don't know one another, they only are there maybe 2.5 days out of the week. And how do you get any kind of a sense of camaraderie or willingness to cooperate or negotiate or compromise if you don't know the other people?
Well, I'll get into the politics of it all, but we have in our area here a young individual, John Plum, who is running for Congress, and he does not have previous experience, naval record, and yet he's willing to delve into the world of public service here at a fairly high level. What advice either would you give to anybody? I don't want to specifically say John, but we have an example here to somebody who's saying, gee, I'd love to make a difference. At this stage of the game, given the confidence level that most people have in Congress generally, how do you get through that?
Well, I'm a supporter of John Plum, and I've given him all the advice that I'm not going to give you over the radio. But I think you have to raise money. That's a sad fact, but the reason these guys, mostly guys, some women, are spending most of their time raising money is that you have to do it. And as a challenger, you cannot get the support of the congressional committees and the lobbyist firms and that kind of thing if you haven't shown that you can raise money. So correctly, I guess 4 out of 5 emails I get from John Plum are about raising money. And he's done a pretty good job of it, incidentally. But in addition to that, I think what you have to do in districts like Bill Klinger had and Stan Lundine, you have to get out and talk to voters directly. Congressman Reed says he's done 200 town meetings. I didn't know that, but that's very impressive. And I think it was interesting. In my last congressional election, I had 8 parts of 8 counties, and I had 8 citizen chairs, in addition to the Democratic Party, citizen chairs in each county. And not because I wanted it that way, but it turned out that each one of the 8 were school teachers. And I think that's largely because school teachers they have the summer off, and because they're spread relatively across the population. But at any rate, I think it's very important to have the feeling of citizen contact and the candidate getting out there and talking to people and listening to people.
Well, the difference is that the districts that Stan and I had were not dependent upon television or media, basically, to get your message out. You didn't have a lot of television or so forth to deal with, so you had to do, retail politics. You had to be down and holding town meetings and getting to people one-on-one, door-to-door, and so forth. When I first ran for Congress, a century ago, it seems like that, I had to raise and spend $100,000. That was it. Today's contested political campaign is going to run up close to $1 million, if not more. So it's been, the whole complexion of the thing has changed, become much more of a brutal kind of an exercise.
Well, we had television. Elmira had 2 television stations, and I bought the World Series for $37.50 for a 30-second commercial, if you can imagine that.
I see Dennis hovering over me, so I think I'm getting the hook. Dennis, back to you.
A great job. Thank you, all 3 of you. This has been a very special opportunity. Greg Peterson, one of the founders of the Robert H. Jackson Center, joining him on the platform, former Democratic Congressman from the Southern Tier, Stan Lundine, and the former Republican Congressman from Northwestern Pennsylvania, Bill Klinger. Let's give them all a round of applause.
Don't forget Mark Russell, Sunday night.
Sunday night, absolutely.
Chautauqua Suites.
We'll be back on Chautauqua Today.